Okay, so are you ready to have your mind kind of bent a little bit?
Yeah.
We're going to be going on a deep dive into the world of addiction,
Okay.
but we're going to be using a surprisingly relatable object,
Okay.
a pickle jar.
Interesting.
Just trust me on this one.
Okay, I'm ready.
It'll make sense in a sec.
I'm intrigued.
So our guide today is licensed social worker Raj Mehta, and we are going to be exploring an excerpt from his book,
Mm-hmm.
The Underground Recovery Book.
Okay.
And he uses this pickle jar analogy to help us visualize what's happening in the brain with addiction.
You know what I find so clever about this approach?
What's that?
Using something as ordinary as a pickle jar
Mm.
to really try to explain addiction
Yeah.
is it helps break down our preconceived notions right from the start.
Totally.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like you come to it with a fresh perspective.
Totally. So paint us a picture.
Okay.
What is the deal with this pickle jar analogy?
Okay, so imagine a cucumber, right?
Okay.
Fresh, green, crunchy.
Got it.
But you put that cucumber in a brine, let it sit for a while, and what happens?
It turns into a pickle.
It transforms irrevocably into a pickle.
Into a pickle.
Yes, and this transformation, as Mehta describes it, mirrors the process of addiction.
Okay, hold on. Irrevocably.
Yeah.
Is he saying that someone who's addicted is permanently changed?
Well, he's highlighting that addiction causes these fundamental changes to the brain,
Okay.
making it really difficult to just simply revert back to how things were before.
Right.
But it's not about labeling someone as permanently a pickle.
Right. Yeah.
It's about understanding the depth of these changes. That willpower alone often isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disease.
Right.
And like any disease, it needs treatment and understanding.
So he's drawing a direct line between the cucumber becoming a pickle and someone developing a substance use disorder.
Yes.
By the way, substance use disorder, that's the clinical term for addiction.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify that for our listener.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
Mehta uses very direct language in his book.
Okay.
Likely to shake people out of complacency, I think.
Yeah.
And really grasp the seriousness of what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
He even challenges readers saying, find a true addict and get them to use drugs successfully.
Wow.
You'll get on the front page of the New York Times.
Wow. He's not mincing words. He's using that statement to really emphasize that willpower alone isn't enough to overcome addiction, right?
Yes.
Because if it were, we wouldn't have this massive, complex issue on our hands.
Precisely. This is where the science comes in and why understanding how addiction physically changes the brain is so crucial.
Okay. So walk us through this science.
Okay.
How does addiction hijack the brain?
Okay.
It feels almost like a vine slowly wrapping around a tree, right?
Yeah,
You don't really see the damage until it's too late.
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So you see, every time someone uses an addictive substance,
Mm-hmm.
it triggers this flood of dopamine in the brain.
Okay.
And dopamine is a neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger
Yeah.
that's associated with pleasure and reward.
So it's like the brain's way of saying, that felt good, let's do that again.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
With repeated exposure, the brain starts needing more and more of that substance to get the same level of reward.
Right.
That initial hit of dopamine just doesn't cut it anymore.
So tolerance builds.
Yes.
What was once pleasurable now just feels normal.
Precisely.
Right.
And as this cycle of craving and use continues, other areas of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
the ones responsible for things like decision-making
Hmm.
and impulse control, they start to get sidelined.
Wow.
The addictive substance becomes the brain's main priority,
Wow.
even when it leads to harmful consequences.
So it really is like that vine slowly taking over.
It is.
And just like you can't reason with a vine. Meth is saying we can't reason with addiction.
Right.
It's not a matter of willpower. It's a physiological change.
It is.
And this is where the stigma around addiction really gets in the way, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because when we don't understand the neuroscience, it's easy to fall back on those harmful judgments.
Right.
They're weak, they lack willpower,
Yeah.
they should just choose to stop.
Whereas Medha's analogy, as odd as it might seem at first,
Right.
it really forces us to see things differently.
It does.
Like you wouldn't walk past a pickle jar and say, get it together, be a cucumber again.
Right.
It sounds absurd.
It sounds absurd when you put it that way.
Right.
We accept that the pickle is what it is because of a process that it underwent.
Right.
And that's what we need to start doing with addiction, understanding it as a medical condition that requires treatment just like any other.
He draws a parallel in the book to other chronic illnesses. He basically says, would we blame someone with diabetes for their condition and tell them to just produce more insulin?
It's the powerful comparison, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it highlights the absurdity
Mm.
of placing blame when what's needed is understanding and support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this understanding, the shift in perspective, is where things start to change, both for individuals struggling with addiction and for society as a whole.
I completely agree.
And this is where hopefully we start to see some real world change.
Yes.
Because if we're viewing addiction as a disease that completely changes our approach to treatment and support, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's no longer about punishment or judgment.
Right.
It's about providing people with the tools and resources they need to manage a medical condition.
So what does that look like in practice? What kind of support are we talking about here?
Well, it starts with access to affordable, evidence-based treatment options.
Okay.
This can include things like therapy, medication-assisted treatment support groups, really a whole spectrum of care tailored to the individual's needs.
And I imagine it's also about creating a system that's easier to navigate.
Yes.
Because let's face it, seeking help for addiction can be incredibly daunting, especially when you're already struggling.
That's a crucial point.
Hmm.
We need to make the process of getting help less intimidating, more compassionate, and more focused on long-term recovery.
And that long-term recovery, that's key, isn't it?
Yes.
Because we're not talking about a quick fix. We're talking about ongoing management of a complex condition.
Exactly. Just like someone with a chronic illness might need ongoing medication or therapy. Someone recovering from addiction might need ongoing support to maintain their well-being.
And that support, as Mehta emphasizes in his book, needs to come from both healthcare professionals and the community at large.
Yes.
We all have a role to play in reducing stigma and creating a more understanding and supportive environment.
He's absolutely right. It's about changing hearts and minds, not just policies and systems.
So what can our listeners do on a practical level to be a part of that change?
Start by educating yourself about addiction.
Yeah?
Challenge your own preconceived notions.
Uh-huh.
Talk to people with lived experience.
Yeah.
Advocate for better policies in your community.
Mm-hmm.
Even small acts of empathy and understanding can make a big difference.
It's like Mehta's saying, don't just walk past the pickle jar.
Yeah.
Take the time to understand how it got that way.
And maybe, just maybe, with enough understanding and compassion, we can help those pickles find their way back to a cucumber patch.
Right.
Or at the very least create a world where being a pickle isn't something to be ashamed of.
That's a powerful image to leave us with. That's a really powerful image to leave us with.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, we'll leave you with this question. What small step can you take today to challenge the stigma surrounding addiction?
Yeah.
And show support for those who are struggling? Think about it.
Yes.
And let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep asking questions.
Yes.
And keep diving deeper.